Hello everyone from sunny Moscow. Today is 5th of June. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time. And many thanks to all of you for your attention, for your time, for joining the stream. And many thanks to all the members of our community who will join later on or will watch this live stream afterwards. After live stream will end. A lot of very important developments and news that Russian media and public is paying attention to. So this episode is going to be informative and hopefully useful to community. There was no questions, dear friends, from any of the support platforms that I can highlight after news segment, either through Boosty or PayPal. So therefore, if you want to highlight any topic, you can use super chat during the stream on Rumble. And of course, after news segment, I will react on it and I will try to be as informative as I can while commenting. Otherwise, well, without any delay, I will start this live stream. And as I said, dear friends, a lot of very important developments are happening. And let's go with the chronology. So yesterday afternoon, Russian media outlets published a statement of Deputy of the Russian Foreign Minister, Ryabkov, who stated that Russia demands clear response from US and UK about Ukrainian attacks on Russian strategical air bases, a Russian nuclear triad. Let's go for little details here. It is important. So the Russian side demands the clear reaction from Washington and London in connection with the Kiev's attacks on Russia's strategic aviation in order to prevent further escalation. This was stated by Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov at the press conference at the task dedicated to the holding of the 11th International Scientific and Expert Forum Primakov readings in Moscow. And once again, dear friends, let's look at their statement itself. I mean, nuances. Russia demands clear reaction from Washington and London in regards to these attacks, recent attacks on Russian nuclear triad, to avoid, in order to prevent further escalation. And further escalation, I guess, in regards to US and UK, because when it comes to Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, then, well, Russia knows with whom Russia is dealing, and their special military operation is quite effectively achieving its main tasks, demilitarization of this terrorist regime, and the process of denazification is also underway. Many people in Kiev-controlled territory probably already are waking up and realizing that they've been indoctrinated by psychopaths in some nonsensical ideas and are regretting this, right? We have a quote from Ryabkov here. Last night and this morning, social media was filled with the speculation about how it would have been impossible to prepare this attack on airfields in Russia without very careful provision of geospatial data by those who have this capability and who are sharing this data with Kiev. These questions remain unanswered, the senior diplomat stated. We demand that both London and Washington react in such a way as to stop this cycle of escalation and return it to something that will be somewhat closer to common sense and the general sense of strategic stability. Very important statements, by the way. Ryabkov is talking about strategic stability, and he's talking about it in regards to Washington and London. I hope that this concept of strategic stability does not belong to their past, and we will find their sufficient share of reason in Western capitals, including London. Ryabkov emphasized. Focus is on London. Okay, Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation noted that those outrageous criminal actions by the Kiev regime definitely point to further escalation. There are no restrictions either on the part of Kiev or on the part of Kiev sponsors, including Britain, who are doing everything, simply everything, to disrupt any opportunity to reach a peaceful resolution to this situation. The terrorist nature of their acts is obvious to everyone. Their silence and their emptiness of any specific reaction from London and other Western capitals are very indicative. This is what shows that these capitals, at the very least, applaud the welcome what happened, Rybkov said. And in the worst case, this confirms that they were part of the preparation of these attacks, including attacks on airfields. And of course, Rybkov is correct. These terrorist attacks on Russian strategical airfields, and this war crime, by the way, and it is war crime because, as I said yesterday, you cannot carry out military operations without designating your personnel as a military. You cannot use civilian infrastructure for that. So Kiev regime and its NATO backers, Washington and London primarily, committed a war crime also, while orchestrating this attack on Russian strategical airfields, all right? And well, after Rybkov's statements, it didn't take longer before Russian president spoke about the matter of recent terrorist attacks that was committed by Kiev regime and its Western backers. And during his meeting with the cabinet, he made quite a few very important statements. So, for example, he said, who negotiate with those who rely on terror? Who negotiates with the terrorists? Vladimir Putin stated on Kiev's requests for a high-level face-to-face summit. So by saying so, Vladimir Putin dismissed straight away possibility that he will meet now or anytime soon with the terrorist and mass murderer Zelensky. So I think this topic is closed now. Russian president also went to say during this meeting with the Russian government members, and I give you some key points from his statements. Their decision on a terrorist attack were made in Ukraine at the political level. The illegitimate regime is degenerating into a terrorist organization, and its sponsors are becoming accomplices of terrorists. So, very important statement from Russian president, which might be indicator that potentially Moscow will designate Kiev regime as a terrorist organization, and in that case, of course, Russian security services and Russian armed forces, Russian militaries will untie their hands and will act more freely to neutralize terrorists, because obviously operations are done very differently against the combatants and against the terrorists. We all understand that. And since the beginning of special military operation, even though to me personally it was very clear that Kiev regime was and is a terrorist regime backed by collective West, until official designation, well, hands of Russian armed forces and Russian intelligence services, Russian security services were tied behind their backs. They could not dealt with them as with the terrorists, right? So soon some very drastic changes might happen, and the Kiev regime might be designated as a terrorist regime, maybe even in upcoming days. Potentially, that's what this statement of Russian president indicates. But yet again, let's wait a little bit and see. Maybe my reading of the big picture is mistaken. Don't know. Vladimir Putin also went to say that Ukraine is suffering huge losses and retreating along the entire front line, which is factual, by the way. So it is trying to intimidate Russia with the terrorist attacks. 100% correct, right? I mean, it's not just Zelensky regime, obviously. This is can be said about globalist control regimes in the collective West, right? London, Berlin, Washington, Paris, and the rest of them. President also said that pause in military actions And he is referring to this topic of 30-day ceasefire that Kiev regime and its NATO backers are articulating for how many weeks now, because globalists know their proxy regime in Kiev needs, and their forces desperately need some break, at least 30-day break. And Russian president spoke about this and said that pause in the military action would be used by Kiev to continue further intensify force mobilization, for pumping up weapons and preparing another terrorist attack. So therefore, Russian answer is no. No, that's it. Topic is closed. Russian president also said that all crimes against civilians on the eve of the second round of the negotiations were aimed at disrupting them, which is also correct. And I also shared similar opinion that most likely, I was saying even before that globalists will try to come up with some huge provocation, either terrorist attack or something similar, to derail these talks in Istanbul. And that's exactly what happened. Globalists and their puppet regimes in collective West did try to derail these talks and basically kind of force Russia to walk away from these talks and then brag about Russia being the side that is don't want to de-escalate. But this attempt failed clearly because Russia, despite these terrorist attacks on the Russian railway network and also on the Russian strategical airfields, Russian delegation went to Istanbul and transferred memorandum to enemy side, and also some agreements in humanitarian field was agreed. At least Russian side is ready to take certain steps in a humanitarian direction, and I spoke about this during the previous updates, right? So president is spot on, absolutely, that Kiev regime and in its NATO backers were trying to derail these talks. Also, he highlighted that the Kiev regime does not need a peace at all, since it would mean a loss of power for them, which is also correct, by the way. For Zelensky and his criminal associates, peace is like a death sentence politically and maybe even literally, because we all know that there were at least several occasions when neo-Nazi formations openly threatened Zelensky and his inner circle with execution if they will agree on anything, right? If they will go for the escalation. And one should keep in mind that these Ukrainian neo-Nazi formations are controlled by which terrorist organizations? By CIA and MI6. They are armed and controlled by CIA and MI6. It's a classical ways of these terrorist organizations. You know, they are always creating the terrorist groups in whichever area of this world they are engaged directly or through proxies. And therefore, as I said, and as Putin highlighted, peace for Kiev regime is definitely death sentence, either in a political sense or potentially even literally, because neo-Nazis might take action against them. Also, Russian president stated that Moscow is not surprised by Kiev's refusal to ceasefire for humanitarian reasons for 2-3 days. And as you know, dear friends, during Istanbul talks, recent Istanbul talks, second round, the Russian side proposed 2-3 day ceasefire in certain sectors, especially after heavy clashes, so that officers will be able to evacuate, commanders will be able to evacuate their killed military personnel. And Kiev regime is refused to this offer from Russian side. And last several days, by the way, on Kiev-controlled territory, as I predicted, actively being generated and pushed a narrative over the public that Kiev should refuse another Russian initiative, which was about transfer of 6,000 killed Ukrainian officers and soldiers to Kiev side, so that the relatives of these killed soldiers will have an opportunity to bury them, right? And as I predicted, by the way, Kiev regime is trying tries to derail this initiative also. And they're coming up with all sorts of nonsensical, crazy reasonings. And let's be real here. Main reason is that if Kiev will agree, of course, main narrative of Zelensky that Kiev regime only lost about 50,000 troops since the beginning of special military operation will collapse big time. And also, well, it's a financial burden on the Kiev regime also, because according to some calculations, as a compensation, Kiev regime will have to pay families of these 6,000 killed soldiers and officers about $2.5 billion. And Zelensky is not a person who likes to share money, even if it's not his money, right? And that's the one of the reasons, by the way, why there is a tens of thousands of missing military personnel in Kiev's forces. And this is the way how Kiev regime, Zelensky, is avoiding to pay compensations to the relatives, to the families of deceased military personnel. So not at all surprise for anyone, and not for the Russian president, that Kiev regime refused to accept this Russian proposal about 2-3 days ceasefire. Most likely they will try to derail this another Russian initiative to transfer from Russian side to Kiev regime side these bodies of 6,000 killed military personnel. Although Moscow already said that next week this transfer might take place if it's organized. And also Russian president pointed out that it is not for the Kiev regime to judge the level of Russian delegation. As you know, Zelensky and his criminal associates time and again are kind of mocking Russian delegation, that this is not their high-level delegation and so on. And well, this is the answer from Russian president, that it's not up to those criminals, terrorists and mass murderers in Kiev to judge level of Russian delegation. So very interesting, important statements from Russian president that he made yesterday during talks, during a meeting with the Russian cabinet, and together with the earlier statements of Ryabkov. I mean, we are getting better understanding of where Moscow is right now in regards to what happened recently, these terrorist attacks on railway network, on strategical airfields, other developments, Istanbul talks, and so on. And as Ryabkov stated, by the way, Moscow demands reaction from Washington and London. Later on yesterday, at evening time, at evening time here, news broke that Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump, published a post on his True social media, then deleted this post and then republished it without some major changes, at least, it seems like. And well, let me read these statements of the Donald Trump. I'm quoting, by the way. I just finished speaking by phone with the President Vladimir Putin of Russia. The call lasted approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. So there was yesterday evening, there was a phone conversation between Trump and Vladimir Putin. Maybe Washington listened to statements of either Ryabkov or some other high-ranking Russian officials that the silence on part of Washington and London is unacceptable. And Trump agreed on this conversation to explain himself, I guess. Anyways, let's continue with his statements. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to their recent attacks on their airfields. We also, and by the way, this is important, isn't it? That Trump himself is highlighting, and we all know how he loves brag about all sorts of things. But this time he was, I guess, forced to acknowledge that conversation, at least indirectly, that conversation was not easy one. Russian president probably was demonstrating that he's not necessarily angry, that he is disturbed, let's say, with what had happened, because it's an attack on Russian nuclear triad, and most likely this attack was conducted with participation of NATO member states, US and UK, namely. And well, the Russian president probably demonstrated that he is very serious about these developments, and retaliation will take place, strong retaliation. And so Trump was forced basically to admit that, yes, it was a hard talk, and will not lead to immediate peace, for sure. And he also highlighted that Russian side will retaliate. So I guess we just have to wait and see what this retaliation will look like, because Russian nuclear triad was breached, one may argue, to restore, or Russian nuclear deterrent was breached with this attack. To restore this nuclear deterrence, obviously some strong force have to be used, and not just only against military assets of Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, but against military assets of the countries that were participating in this attack, one way or another. And I mean, when I say these countries that are most likely participated, yet again, it's US and UK, first of all, right? So therefore, I don't know what is going to happen. It's a very difficult situation. If you remember, by the way, I was always saying that with constant escalation, Western ruling class will generate a situation when at some point Russian leadership will find itself in a sort of a corner, when no matter how much they want to see the escalation, they will have no option but to retaliate, and retaliate big. And Russian leadership definitely is in that position. So therefore, probably Russia will retaliate big time. It just has to happen to restore Russia's nuclear triad, because Russia's nuclear deterrence, because you cannot attack nuclear triad, by the way. You cannot attack nuclear forces. It is just too dangerous. And Washington and London made a fatal mistake by organizing this attack. And if they think they have plausible deniability on their hands, and they can say it was a Kiev regime, it has nothing to do with us, well, I mean, this game can be played by both sides. Russia can play this game, and quite well. So we will find out soon. What is going to happen. But I guess conversation between Trump and Putin definitely was one of the most difficult conversations that Trump had ever has. Right? And in his post, he went to also say that they also discuss Iran, and the fact that time is running out on Iran's decision in regards to nuclear weapons, which must be made quickly. I stated to President Putin that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, and on this I believe that we were in agreement. President Putin suggested that he will participate in the discussions with Iran, and that he could perhaps be helpful in getting this brought to the rapid conclusion. It is my opinion that Iran has been slow walking their decision on this very important matter, and we will need a definitive answer in a very short period of time. And well, Iran responded, by the way. Even before Trump posted this article, I shared on my Telegram and Twitter X page statements from Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, who said directly that if US is demanding that Iran would not have nuclear weapons, then, well, Iran is happy with that. right? Because they have no intention to build their nuclear weapons. But if Washington demands Iran to get rid of, excuse me, enrichment capabilities, then well, it's a deadlock. There is no path forward from there. So ball is actually on US's side, not on the Iran side. Iran is very clear where it stands, right? But anyways, of course, we are focused now on Ukrainian crisis, Russia-US, Russia-NATO relations. In regards to Iranian crisis, later on, I'll give you additional information, dear friends. And so interesting statements from Trump, for sure. And well, it was not just a Trump, but also Pope, who had a phone conversation with the Russian president yesterday. And not surprisingly, Leo XIV asked Putin to make a gesture that would favor peace. I mean, how convenient, isn't it? So according to these elements, these individuals, this Pope and Donald Trump, who at one point joke around being a Pope himself, according to these elements, Russia should observe whatever terrorist attacks Russian enemies will conduct against us and do nothing in retaliation. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm not going to talk. I'm not even going to comment anymore on this. This is obviously total nonsense. And Vatican, I'm not surprised that Vatican is taking such a position, because Vatican is a historical enemy of Orthodox Christianity, by the way. That's how I see Vatican. That's how majority of Orthodox Christians see Vatican. And I'm not talking about Catholics, by the way. I'm talking about Vatican, which is quite a powerful organization, right? So yes, just to highlight that it's not just Trump that called Russian president, but I guess he used or CIA used its means, influence, to call this U.S. citizen that is in charge in the Vatican now to make to talk to Putin also. Okay, we hear what they have to say, but Russia will do what Russia has to do. Period. And to continue on the matter of this Ukrainian crisis and current escalation, as I already said, by the way, and the Vzгляд newspaper is separately highlighting that U.S. President Donald Trump stated that during the phone conversation, Russian President Vladimir Putin promised to respond to Kyiv's attack on Russian military airfields. And obviously, Kyiv's attack is in quotes, because nobody with even, I don't know, one brain cell, by the way, in the head, will believe ever that this attack was conducted by Kyiv regime independently, without involvement of US and UK, potentially even some other NATO member states, but primarily US and UK. So therefore, obviously, under sentence of Kyiv's attacks, we should see attacks of NATO countries, right? And well, Putin, according to Trump, stated that there will be retaliation, and the only question is now scale of this retaliation, because ordinary, or let's say usual strikes on Kyiv controlled territory with drones or missiles obviously not going to restore nuclear deterrence. We all understand that, and I think there is no questions about it in Kremlin also. So I guess there will be some, if you ask me what might happen, then I can tell you that probably Russia will take some strong actions against her military and logistical infrastructure of the Kyiv regime. Maybe even Moscow will designate Kyiv regime as a terrorist regime, and their action will be taken to neutralize leadership of this terrorist organization. That's the one direction. And another direction, well, something might happen with their, and most likely will happen with US and British military assets sometime in the future, by the way, not necessarily today, tomorrow, or after a week. Sometime in the future, let's say, something will happen with the significant military assets of UK, US, and whichever other country from NATO was involved in any way, shape, or form on these attacks against Russian nuclear triad, and Moscow will say that you know what, we had no idea that this was coming. I mean, yeah, how sad. We did not knew. I mean, we were not informed, and there are, as I said, by the way, plausible deniability works both ways, right? And well, Russian leadership might say, yes, man, things happened, and you know what, you're welcome. Let's continue. That's it. But something bigger is definitely going to happen, by the way. For sure, Russia cannot slide this attack on Russian triad, by the way, nuclear triad. It's not happening, right? Not in this, not in any other universe. Hello, everyone. I hope you find informative and useful this short clip from main news update. And if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.